All right, back to this for the second half of the Revolutionary War. So here we got Saratoga being a turning point. Saratoga in upstate New York here, and so what happened was John Burgoyne needs to garrison all the forts he captured. So he leaves 300 to 500 soldiers at every single fort. So his army goes down, takes all these little forts. His army gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Benedict Arnold using the same kind of that hit and run guerrilla campaign that the Continental's been using. Fights small little battles against Burgoyne and the British. British start taking some losses, getting picked away. Eventually, the Battle of Saratoga is a 2 month long battle, so little skirmishes here and there. Gates has 8,000 men, and Burgoyne has 7,000 men. And Arnold, Gates and Arnold don't get along. They have very different ideas, very different thoughts on how to fight the war. The British are, getting held back, and we see more and more reinforcements arrive. Arnold's the guy that goes out there and leads from the front. He is not really necessarily an British Army kind of guy. I mean, Gates was in the British Army. He would stand in the back and order guys around. Arnold would go in front and lead guys and try to lead his soldiers from the front. Arnold's guy goes out there and starts pushing the British back at Saratoga. Eventually, Burgoyne decides to surrender. Now, Gates is the guy who takes on surrender and gets his name on everything. I understand back then, being an officer was all about the notoriety, all about the honor. And Benedict Arnold is the guy who was angry and quits because he doesn't get that honor. And Gates is considered this big hero. Now, Arnold later on goes and joins the British, takes over West Point. So that's the idea of being a Benedict Arnold and the idea of being a traitor. Now, the French take notice. They can't believe that the British are getting beat by this little colonial ragtag army. And they're like, hey, you know what? Maybe this isn't a bad thing. Now, understand that at this point in time, armies don't fight in the winter. Fighting a war back then was kind of like baseball. You didn't play in bad weather, not in rain, not in snow. And so every time you would winter your army. In 1778, Washington winters at a place called Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. It was one of the coldest winters on record. I understand most of these guys in the army don't have shoes or boots. They're honest to God tying rags around their feet. They're lacking food, fresh water. They're all sick. 1/4 of this army dies from either starvation, disease, or exposure to the cold. One thing that does go well here is a guy by the name of Friedrich von Steuben. France is talking to the Americans, obviously, and Ben Franklin is the new ambassador of France. And France kind of like, U.S. guys, listen, if you guys want to win, you have to become a real soldier, that kind of thing. And they send Baron Friedrich von Steuben, who wasn't a baron at all, he's a Prussian general, and they sent him to America to train the American soldiers to fight Europeans. I understand this guy was a great soldier. He was one of the leaders of the Prussian army, and the Prussians were at this time the greatest soldiers in the world. And so he goes there to train American troops like that. I understand about von Steuben is that he didn't speak a word of English. He would sit and curse and swear in German at everybody, but eventually he got through to them and helped train the army to a real fighting force that had some confidence. Now the French, they make the treaty with the fledgling American United States, and they said, we're gonna help you out. France promises 10,000 men and a fleet of ships. Here's the problem: that stuff's not gonna come until 1780. It's gonna be 2 more years until it gets there. So the Americans need to hold on for 2 years until they can get France involved. Now it's really important because France is going to give them all the things that they need to fight the British: money, uniforms, weapons, training, help, and the biggest thing of all is this right here: a fleet of ships. Okay, a fleet of ships that they can fight against the British with and run those blockades. Plus 10,000 more soldiers. They're used to fighting a European army. Now, understand, lifetime in the U.S. isn't great. There's a lot of profiteering going on. So, like, prices go through the roof. Obviously, food and clothing, all kind of is needed for soldiers, and people that are selling at huge high prices to make money off the war. Guns and gunpowder, food, those kind of things. So, prices go up just for army. Price goes up for everybody. And so all these war-making goods very, very scarce. You have so much money around chasing so few goods, so little things available that all the prices are through the roof between inflation and the war and the war profiteering. And I said civilians were always kept off by war. I mean, there's violence happening in cities and fighting happening in cities. There were the prices. I mean, women were stuck doing the work that men usually had to do, and obviously civilians were for and against the war. It's not, it wasn't, most time battles were supposed to be fought outside of the area of cities and that kind of stuff, out in fields. It wasn't supposed to be like happening right in the middle of towns, but that stuff still didn't happen yet, and it was a really tough life for a lot of people living in the United States. Um, Obviously, Saratoga was that biggest point, biggest turning point for the U.S. Army, and that's point they obviously have no navy. Instead, the only thing they have are called privateers. Basically, hired independent ships, independent privates, put guns on them, and had him go attack the British. And the most famous one by far is this guy right here, a guy named John Paul Jones. He had a ship named the Bohème Richard, which is essentially French for Poor Richard, named after basically named after Ben Franklin and Poor Richard's Almanac. And he was kind of one of these privateers who was out there fighting against the British. And he actually got in a battle off the coast of Canada with a ship called the Serapis. And it was this big ship that went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth for a while. And the idea of how they would fight back then was that you would shoot cannons at each other, okay, until you battered the sails down enough and they couldn't move. You would bring your ship close, lock on, jump the other ship, and take it over. Well, over time, both ships had just beaten each other senseless, essentially, over time. And the British call over and say, John Paul Jones, will you surrender? And instead, Jones yells out, "I have not yet begun to fight," his famous words. And so in the end, the ships keep fighting each other. The British lock on. The Americans fight back, take over the Serapis. The Bohème Richard sinks, but now the U.S. has this new ship, the Serapis, to fight. And kind of called John Paul Jones the father of the American Navy because he's one of the first big winners of an actual naval battle. And we'll see the Navy play a lot more effort in the War of 1812, the next conflict that the United States fights. With big changes comes with this von Steuben, while the whole thing's going on here. He's teaching soldiers how to fight, how to stay in lines, how to march, how to be brave. And based on the face of danger, he fought the British, knew how to lead. He kind of explained everything he had to do to live. And this idea of Friedrich von Steuben played a big role. Gave the soldier skill, gave him confidence. He didn't speak the language. Amazing, be sworn at in different languages. It'd be kind of fun. So eventually, soldiers make it out of Valley Forge. Winter comes. There's a lot of people deserving, a lot of starved, a lot of freezing. One of the things that Washington actually helped people survive during Valley Forge was by organizing the longest cattle drive in history. He brought a whole herd of cattle in to Valley Forge, and guys just kill a cow, cut off steaks for themselves. Surviving through that winter was really, really important. Now we go to the last little part of the war. We'll finish up with what's called the Southern Strategy. So by the time we get to 1780, get through that winter, get 1780, the war basically moved from Massachusetts to the middle counties all the way down to the south now. And it's one of the British goals is that they thought they had a lot more loyalists in the south. And that's true. Also, they thought that the most important resource in the Americas was the south for the cotton and tobacco and the big farming. And so they want a lot of big. They kind of took over a lot of cities, but away from the big cities, there's still a lot of patriots. And they have two generals. They moved Gates down there as well as General Nathaniel Greene, who was a former British general as well. And so said the English bring in Lord General Cornwallis, who was considered one of the best generals in America. The man is at this time considered a military genius, except he's extremely, extremely arrogant. He thought that he was fighting against farmers with pitchforks, and that it should be easy. And so he starts this fighting in South Carolina, pushes to the north, trying to link up and cut Washington off before he can get down to the south. Now, America loses a lot of battles early on again. They lost 5,000 soldiers at Charlestown or Charleston. The Battle of Canada was one of the worst losses in his whole time. A whole army got lost when they were fighting against Cornwallis because he was marching kind of fighting that European style. The idea of fighting... He's from that European style of fighting, muzzle to muzzle, nose to nose, fire 3 shots, and run at each other. And it didn't work. One of the people that got very famous in the British was this guy named Bannister Tarleton, this guy right here. He was a dragoon, or one of the cavalrymen for the British, who was known to attack and kill civilians, kill prisoners, and kind of made a name for himself amongst the countryside. One of the little battles that goes unknown was King Mountain and the Cow Pens, 2 battles that kind of weren't really well known, but were big deals. King's Mountain was when Patriot militia, almost all mountain men, guys who live out in the sticks, defeated 1,000 British soldiers. And so they were fighting against farmers with pitchforks. And a British loyalist army. I mean, pretty much the Patriots would sit in front of behind the rocks, hide behind the trees, hide and fight like a European using that guerrilla warfare style and hold off three bayonet charges. Now, as these guys are surrendering, though, it's kind of funny. The Patriots decide to all go in, kill all those that surrender, give them what they call Tarleton's Quarter, since the British have been killing all the civilians. Eventually, Alexander Green becomes the general on this southern campaign, and Green uses what's called a delaying tactic. Basically, just tries to harass Cornwallis and cut up his trade lines, his supply lines. I mean, armies needed all the food, all the ammo, all that kind of stuff. He basically just tried to slow him down to Wash can move himself down from the north, and the French should get over. Cornwallis makes a huge mistake. He decides to fortify himself at a place called Yorktown, and Yorktown is right here. Here's Yorktown, okay? Here's the York River, and essentially he put himself into, it's almost like painting himself into a corner. It's right here off Chesapeake Bay. So essentially he thought he would be able to get the British Navy in here on the river and get all his army out. Yeah, well, he kind of screwed that up because the British Navy got beat to that spot by the French Navy. And all of a sudden you have the French and American armies over here and the French Navy over here. And he essentially is just stuck right here. And they were kind of waiting him out, dug trenches, waited him out until he had to eventually surrender. And it was waiting until, they're done. Essentially, they got back here and were stuck. Cornwallis eventually surrendered because he couldn't break out. He surrendered his sword to Washington. In fact, he actually didn't surrender his sword himself. He actually takes a lieutenant and sends him out with his sword to give to Washington. Kind of one of those like I'm too embarrassed moves. And at that point, America basically wins the war. We signed the Treaty of Paris, which is signed in Paris, and Great Britain essentially gave up. They pretty much said, "Listen, United States, they're going to crash, they're going to burn, and I'm crawling back to England anyway, so let them go." The Treaty of Paris was negotiated by three guys. You have John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and John Jay. And essentially, one of the big things they wanted is that they wanted the British to recognize USA. And so the British had to basically accept them as a country. USA also got all the lands east of Mississippi. So everything Mississippi over east, except for was Florida, was now U.S. territory. One person that talked about Native Americans at all. They had no representation. And they weren't even mentioned in the treaty at all. So a lot of Native American tribes went from being friends with the French, friends with the British, well, friends or property, we would call them, to now the United States. And so the states, started, wondering, what's going on here. And as states kind of questioned more and more things, the British actually never left. The British had all these forts up and now, like this area of the country in Wisconsin, at Prairie du Chien, at Prairie du Chien in Green Bay, over in Detroit. They had forts still there, and they just never left. So you have this new nation. You have a group of people that don't even know it's a new nation right now. You have the enemy still in your area, and you have your own country. Kind of should think about. Throw the new America right here real quick. There's our last slide here. Before the war, you have this really big distinction, okay? And you have elites, you have commoners, really evident, because there's a lot of success going on here. But the idea of patriotism went among all the different levels. I kind of started with, the rich, but it eventually filtered down to the poor. And so we really kind of added this level of equality throughout the population, the idea, too, of all men created equal, and kind of that idea of promoting for one common good. The idea of corruption, kind of the of what makes it a good American, the idea you're a self-made person in political leadership. And so really, even though, like, there's a really small perception, a new perception of, like, everybody equal, by the end of this whole thing, though, there was still just a small upper class at the very top of America's wealth. So really, think about this new idea of a new republic and less, gentry, less rich people. It was still a very small group, rich top at the very top, and a big portion on the very bottom. And we're going to leave off with that, guys. We'll kind of talk about this whole idea of the war and why we think America won. That's kind of the big question for answer. Looking at from your reading, looking for what we did here, guys. Why does America win? What allows it to actually happen? And we'll see what happens after that. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Have a good time. Have a good weekend. And we'll see you guys on Monday.